You have been living inside a carefully constructed illusion. That sparkling diamond on your finger is not a sacred tradition. It is a corporate scam from the 1930s. The tool in your garage you used to trim trees was a horrifying 18th century medical blade. From the prison sentence in your gym routine to the shocking origins of products you trust daily, we are dismantling 40 stubborn lies inside your own home. Get ready because history is about to change. 1. The diamond engagement ring is not a symbol of love. It is one of the most successful lies ever sold to the human race. Before 1938, diamonds were ordinary minerals with almost no value, and most people got married without one. Then the De Beers cartel, sitting on a mountain of surplus stones, he hired advertisers to convince the world that a man's love could only be measured in carats. They invented the slogan, placed the images in every magazine, and within one generation turned worthless gravel into a mandatory purchase. You are not wearing love on your finger. You are wearing a marketing campaign designed by a price-fixing cartel that needed to empty its warehouses. 2. You use GPS every single day to find restaurants, avoid traffic, and navigate roads you have driven 100 times. But this technology was not built for your convenience. It was built to guide long-range military hardware to their targets with perfect accuracy from space. During the Cold War, the U.S. military spent years constructing a satellite grid so their most destructive weapons could hit any point on Earth without missing. But then in 1983, a civilian airliner drifted off course and was shot down, killing 269 people. The tragedy forced the government to open the system to the public. The calm voice telling you to turn left was originally engineered to serve the most destructive conflicts in history. 3. Every time you peel back that silver foil seal under your medicine cap, you are not doing it for freshness. You are doing it because of an unsolved crime that changed global manufacturing overnight. In 1982, an unknown person in Chicago tampered with random Tylenol bottles and placed them back on store shelves. 7 innocent people lost their lives. The person responsible was never identified. They simply vanished without a trace. The panic that followed forced every pharmaceutical company on Earth to redesign their packaging within months. That seal on your medicine was not born from science or tradition. It was born from a nameless mystery that was never solved. 4. That little blue icon you tap every single day is not just a wireless tech name. It is the personal brand of a 10th century Viking warlord. Bluetooth is named after King Harald Gormson, a Danish conqueror so ruthless he unified all of Scandinavia's warring tribes through sheer brutal force. His dead tooth had rotted to a deep blue-gray shade, earning him the nickname Bluetooth. The logo you see every single day is not modern design. It is 2 ancient Viking runes fused together to spell his initials. Every time you connect your headphones, you are invoking the name of a man who conquered nations with a battle axe. 5. When Coca-Cola was invented in 1886, it was not a soft drink. It was a commercially sold tonic containing a powerful pharmaceutical ingredient sourced directly from the coca leaf that was widely accepted in medical circles at the time. It was marketed as an intellectual brain tonic that doctors recommended for headaches, exhaustion, and depression. Respectable people consumed it daily with complete confidence. The original pharmaceutical ingredient was only quietly removed from the recipe in 1903 when government pressure became impossible to ignore. By then, the brand was so powerful the story was buried within a decade. Either the drink that billions of people pour for their children at birthday parties started as a medically endorsed tonic sold in pharmacies. 6. High heels were not designed for women. They were designed to help male soldiers kill more efficiently on horseback. In 10th century Persia, cavalry archers wore raised heels specifically to lock their feet into stirrups while charging at full speed, letting them stand in the saddle and fire arrows with deadly accuracy without being thrown off. The style spread to Europe as a symbol of masculine military dominance. Women only adopted it to appear powerful in a world that reserved power entirely for men. The moment lower classes began copying the look, aristocratic men abandoned it completely. Either a battlefield killing tool became the defining symbol of femininity because wealthy men refused to share a trend. 7. The chainsaw was invented in a hospital, not a forest. In the late 1700s, two Scottish doctors needed a specialized instrument to surgically assist during the most dangerous deliveries in an era with no safe alternatives. They built a hand-cranked, serrated chain blade designed specifically to help doctors act quickly enough to save a life when every second counted. It was a maternity ward instrument. It was not adapted for trees until over a century later when medicine finally evolved past needing it. Every horror film that puts a chainsaw in a killer's hands is unknowingly referencing a surgical tool that was built to save mothers and babies. 8. If you hate every single minute on a treadmill, and that is exactly what the inventor intended. In 1818, a British engineer built this machine specifically to destroy the will of prisoners. Inmates were forced to climb rotating steps for up to 10 hours a day, powering grain mills through sheer exhausted labor. It was not exercise. It was a punishment designed to hollow a person out completely from the inside. Many prisoners suffered permanent physical damage from the daily routine. The machine was eventually banned from British prisons in 1898 because it was considered too cruel and inhumane. You are paying a monthly fee to simulate a punishment so brutal that Victorian-era prisons finally outlawed it. 9. Listerine spent its first few decades as an industrial floor cleaner and surgical disinfectant. It was harsh, chemical, and almost nobody was buying it for personal use. So the company did something extraordinary. They invented a disease. They coined the word halitosis to make ordinary bad breath sound like a dangerous clinical condition requiring urgent treatment. They then ran ferocious advertisements telling people this condition was ruining marriages, destroying friendships, and costing people jobs. They terrified an entire generation into buying floor cleaning chemicals for their mouths. Within a decade, it was a bathroom essential in millions of homes. The reason you feel you need mouthwash every morning was invented entirely in a boardroom. 10. Play-Doh was not created to spark creativity in children. It was created to clean soot off wallpaper. In the 1930s, coal-heated homes left thick black deposits on walls, and a soap company developed a doughy compound to roll across surfaces and lift the grime without tearing the paper. It worked brilliantly. Then gas heating arrived, coal became obsolete, and the company was heading toward bankruptcy. Someone noticed children had been using the leftover compound to make small sculptures. They removed the cleaning chemicals, added a distinctive smell, and repackaged an industrial cleaning failure as a toy. The thing millions of children have pressed through their fingers their entire childhood was a repurposed wallpaper cleaner. 11. Sanitary pads were invented to stop soldiers from dying from their injuries in the trenches of World War I. A company called Kimberly-Clark developed a material 5 times more absorbent than cotton bandages, almost cheap enough to manufacture at military scale. Nurses working on the front lines quickly realized the material worked equally well for their monthly cycles. After the war ended, the company was left with warehouses full of military surplus and no battlefield buyers. They repackaged the product with new branding and introduced it as a feminine hygiene item. Something designed to stop soldiers dying in mud and blood became one of the most important consumer products in human history. War created it, marketing renamed it. 12. The same chemical you use today to scrub your toilet was sold to women in the early 20th century as a safe and recommended personal hygiene product. Lysol advertisements in major magazines promised that using this harsh disinfectant would guarantee a happy marriage and lasting affection. Doctors endorsed it, and women trusted it completely. What the advertisements never disclosed was that it was causing serious harm to an untold number of women across the country. Nothing about the chemical formula changed between then and now. Only the marketing did. A substance that was hurting people became the standard household disinfectant. The label changed. The danger did not. 13. When 7-Up launched in 1929, it was not a soft drink. It contained a powerful medical substance of the 1900s that today requires a doctor's prescription. The original name was lithiated lemon lime soda, and it was marketed as a cure for hangovers, a remedy for anxiety, and something to calm crying babies. Families were giving a powerful pharmaceutical compound to their children with dinner, and complete confidence. Once the government forced the company to remove it from the recipe in 1948. For nearly 20 years, an entire generation was unknowingly consuming a regulated medical substance purchased at the corner store. The casual fizzy drink on your grocery shelf was a prescription-level compound the entire time. 14. Fanta was invented in Germany during the war from industrial waste because nothing else was available. When the conflict began, trade embargoes cut off the Coca-Cola syrup supply entirely. Rather than shut down, the local operation created a new drink from whatever factory scraps could be sourced: apple fiber, cheese byproducts, and other industrial leftovers most people would never consider food. They named it Fanta, from the German word for imagination, because creativity was the only resource they had left. It became popular not because people enjoyed it, but because all other options had completely disappeared. The colorful soda brand, now enjoyed in over 100 countries, was born from desperation, wartime rationing, and factory garbage. 15. Your morning bowl of cornflakes was not invented for nutrition, convenience, or taste. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg invented cornflakes in the 1890s, specifically as an anti-desire food. He ran a sanitarium and genuinely believed that flavorful, exciting food inflamed human passions and caused sinful behavior. His clinical solution was to feed patients the most aggressively bland food he could create to suppress those urges entirely. He filed a patent for a boring, tasteless flake and served it to patients as medical treatment. And he would be absolutely horrified to see the mountains of sugar, chocolate, and marshmallows we now pour into the same bowl every morning. The most popular breakfast in America started as a prescription for purity. 16. The Slinky came from a naval engineer who failed completely at his assigned mission. Richard James was developing a spring mechanism in 1943 to keep sensitive navigation instruments stable on ships moving through rough water. During testing, he accidentally knocked a prototype off a shelf. Instead of clattering to the floor, it walked gracefully down a stack of books end over end in a perfectly smooth arc. He watched it happen and understood immediately that his failed military device was something far more interesting to children than to the Navy. He brought it home, showed his wife Betty, and she found the name in a dictionary. A piece of serious military equipment became one of the best-selling toys in history because of one moment of accidental clumsiness. 17. Post-it notes exist because a scientist failed completely at his actual job. Spencer Silver was trying to develop a super strong adhesive for aircraft construction at 3M, but accidentally created something almost entirely useless. A glue so weak it peeled off with no effort and left no residue behind. By every measure of his real assignment, it was a total failure. The glue sat unused in the company for years until a colleague named Art Fry got frustrated by a bookmark that kept falling out of his hymn book during church. Silver's failed aerospace glue was suddenly the perfect answer. A weak adhesive rejected by the aircraft industry became the most widely used office product on Earth. A professional failure changed every desk in the world. 18. The microwave oven was not invented. It was stumbled upon by a radar engineer who melted a chocolate bar in his own pocket. Percy Spencer was working on military radar equipment in 1945 when he noticed a chocolate bar in his trousers had completely liquefied with no heat source anywhere nearby. He connected it to the magnetron he had been testing. He experimented with popcorn next, which exploded across the laboratory floor. Then he tried an egg, which exploded directly in a colleague's face. He built a metal box to contain the energy and the microwave oven was born. The device reheating your leftovers tonight in under 2 minutes was a complete military accident caused by a melted chocolate bar. 19. The most powerful water gun ever made was invented by a NASA engineer whose refrigerator experiment sprung a leak in his bathroom. Lonnie Johnson was testing a high-pressure pump system for a space mission when a connection failed and fired a powerful stream of water completely across the room. He stood there for a moment and immediately thought it would make an extraordinary toy. He spent years developing the concept in his spare time, licensing it to Hasbro, and the Super Soaker became one of the highest-selling toy lines in recorded history. A device designed to regulate thermal energy for spacecraft ended up soaking millions of children in backyards around the world. A space program plumbing accident built an empire. 20. Velcro was invented because a dog walk was mildly irritating. In 1941, Swiss engineer Georges de Mestral returned from a mountain hike with his dog completely covered in tiny burrs clinging to his trousers and his dog's fur. Most people would have grumbled and forgotten about it. De Mestral put the burrs under a microscope and saw thousands of microscopic hooks gripping the loops of fabric with remarkable precision. He spent 8 years developing a synthetic version in nylon, failing repeatedly before finally perfecting it. NASA later adopted it for spacesuits. An astronaut's fastening system that helped humans walk in space began because one man found a dog walk mildly inconvenient and refused to let it go. 21. Robert Cheeseborough discovered Vaseline on an oil rig in 1859, where workers were rubbing a dark waxy residue from drilling equipment directly onto their cuts and burns to heal them. He took samples home, spent months refining the black sludge into the clear, odorless jelly sitting in your bathroom cabinet today, and became so convinced of its healing power that he ate a spoonful every single morning for the rest of his life. He lived to 96. The product he built was marketed as a remedy for almost every ailment, and the world believed him entirely. The jelly you put on your lips and your baby's skin is a refined petroleum byproduct from the same underground deposits as the fuel in your car. 22. Tea bags were never meant to be used for brewing. In 1908, a New York merchant named Thomas Sullivan shipped small silk pouches of tea as cheap sample packaging to save money on tins. His customers had never seen anything like it, assumed the pouch was part of the brewing process, and dropped the entire thing into boiling water. They were completely wrong, but they loved the convenience so deeply they started requesting more. When they complained the silk mesh restricted the flavor, Sullivan switched to gauze and accidentally created one of the most universally used daily rituals in human history. You have been making tea the wrong way since 1908. The mistake became the standard, and no one ever corrected it. 23. The popsicle was invented by an 11-year-old who forgot to clean up his mess on a cold night. In 1905, a young Frank Epperson left a cup of powdered soda mixed with water on his porch with a stirring stick inside. The temperature dropped, and by morning the whole thing had frozen solid around the stick. He ate it and thought it was extraordinary. He spent years selling them to neighbors before filing a patent in 1923, 18 years later. His own children convinced him to change the name from Epsicle to Popsicle. A child's forgetfulness on a cold porch created the defining summer treat for every generation that followed. The mess he forgot to clean became a product worth billions. 24. The chocolate chip cookie was a kitchen mistake. Ruth Wakefield was making chocolate cookies in 1938 and ran out of powdered baking chocolate. She grabbed a block of semi-sweet chocolate, broke it into rough pieces, hammered and threw them into the dough expecting them to melt and blend in. They did not melt. They held their shape and created pockets of intense concentrated chocolate throughout the cookie. She had completely failed to make what she intended. What she made instead became the most popular cookie in America. She later sold the recipe to Nestlé in exchange for a lifetime supply of chocolate. The world's most beloved biscuit was born entirely from running out of the right ingredient and making do with what was left. 25 Charter, potato chips were invented out of pure spite. In 1853, Chef George Crumb was working at a restaurant in New York when a wealthy customer kept sending his fried potatoes back. Too thick, too soft, too soggy, never good enough. Crumb lost his patience completely. He sliced a potato so thin it was nearly transparent, fried it until it was rock solid, drowned it in salt, and sent it back expecting the man to be offended and leave. The customer loved it. He ordered more. Other diners demanded them. Word spread fast. Within a generation, the potato chip had become one of the most consumed snack foods on earth. A calculated act of disrespect from a furious chef built a global industry generating hundreds of billions every single year. 26. Your car windshield does not shatter into lethal shards because a French chemist was clumsy in his laboratory. In 1903, Edouard Benedictus knocked a glass flask off a high shelf and braced for the inevitable explosion of broken glass. The flask cracked completely, but held its shape without spraying a single shard in any direction. He discovered it had previously held a liquid plastic solution that dried into a thin protective film across the interior. He filed a patent immediately and envisioned it protecting people in automobile crashes. Car manufacturers ignored him for years, insisting safety glass was an unnecessary expense. It took enough lives being lost to shattering windshields before the industry finally listened. The glass protecting you every time you drive came from a drop flask in an empty room. 27. Penicillin was discovered because Alexander Fleming did not wash his dishes before going on holiday. He left a stack of used petri dishes on his laboratory bench for 2 full weeks. When he returned, a mold had grown on one dish and killed every single bacterial colony surrounding it in a perfect circle. When he identified it as Penicillium notatum and understood immediately what he was looking at, penicillin became the world's first true antibiotic and has since saved an estimated 200 million lives. Diseases that routinely killed people, basic infections, pneumonia, sepsis, became treatable almost overnight. The entire foundation of modern medicine exists because one scientist skipped his washing up before a summer holiday. 28. The friction match was not invented. It was discovered by accident while a man was annoyed by a dirty stick. In 1826, pharmacist John Walker was stirring experimental chemicals with a wooden rod when a crusty blob dried onto the end. He tried to scrape it off against the stone floor of his shop. The stick burst into flames. He had accidentally produced instant portable fire from a simple striking motion. Before this, creating fire required flint, steel, or carefully maintained embers. Walker never patented his discovery, allowing others to quickly refine it and build fortunes from it. The most essential tool in human history, fire on demand in your pocket, was found by a man trying to clean a dirty stick. 29. X-rays were discovered because a physicist terrified himself by seeing his own skeleton in the dark. Wilhelm Röntgen was experimenting with electrical currents in his darkened laboratory in 1895 when a screen on the far side of the room began glowing without explanation. He reached out to block the light and saw the bones of his own hand projected clearly on the wall. He could see every finger bone. He could see his ring sitting on top of the flesh. He named the invisible rays X because he had absolutely no idea what they were. He later photographed his wife's hand, the first medical X-ray ever taken. She reportedly said it made her feel she had seen her own death. Every broken bone ever diagnosed began with that single terrifying moment. 30. Brandy was invented by merchants who were trying to cheat on their taxes and accidentally created something extraordinary. In the 16th century, Dutch traders shipped wine from France with taxes calculated entirely by cargo volume. To reduce what they owed, they boiled the wine into a concentrated syrup, planning to add water back upon arrival. When they tasted the concentrate, it was rich, complex, and far more powerful than anything they had drunk before. They stopped adding the water completely. The luxury spirit served in crystal glasses at the finest restaurants in the world was not born from a winemaker's craft or artistic vision. It was an accounting trick by merchants trying to pay less tax. The cheat became the product. The fraud became the tradition. 31. The entire modern world was built from scratch because we ran out of beetle secretions. In 1907, shellac, a resin produced from the secretions of the lac beetle, was the primary wire insulator powering the electrical industry worldwide. Global demand had completely outpaced what the beetles could produce. A chemist named Leo Baekeland set out to find a synthetic substitute and instead created Bakelite, the first fully synthetic plastic. It could be molded into any shape, conducted no electricity, and never decomposed. Every phone, computer, car component, medical device, and food container that followed traces back to that single discovery. The plastic covering every surface of your life exists entirely because beetles could not secrete fast enough to keep up with human ambition. 32. Your kitchen silverware was not invented for dining. It was a failed military project to build better weapons. In 1913, metallurgist Harry Brearley was contracted by the British military to develop a steel alloy that could resist the erosion caused by rapid rifle fire. He tried dozens of chromium combinations. Nothing improved the weapons. He threw the failed samples into a scrap pile and moved on. Months later, every other piece of scrap in that pile had rusted and corroded completely. His failed gun barrel samples were still gleaming as though freshly polished. He had accidentally created an alloy that resisted oxidation entirely. Cutlery manufacturers understood immediately. Every fork and knife in your kitchen drawer is a military project that failed its original purpose and accidentally became essential. 33. Every digital song you have ever streamed was built around one woman singing alone about watching strangers in a diner. When German engineers were developing the MP3 format in the late 1980s, they needed a test track that would expose every weakness in their compression software. They chose Tom's Diner by Suzanne Vega because her unaccompanied voice had a specific warmth and clarity that broke their early algorithms in ways nothing else could. They ran the software thousands of times, adjusting the code until her voice sounded perfect in compressed form. Every digital music format that followed was calibrated against those adjustments. A quiet folk song about an ordinary New York morning became the invisible foundation of the entire global music streaming industry. 34. Nobody knows who invented the fire hydrant, and the reason is devastating. The patent was filed in the early 1800s and stored safely in the United States Patent Office in Washington. In 1836, the Patent Office caught fire and burned completely to the ground. The records were destroyed. The name of the person who invented the device we rely on daily to prevent entire cities from burning was consumed by the very thing it was built to stop. It is the most perfect and crushing irony in the entire history of invention. The proof of who designed our primary defense against fire was itself destroyed in a fire. The inventor remains unknown and always will be. 35. The pacemaker was born because an engineer grabbed the wrong component from a box and did not notice until the machine explained everything. In 1956, Wilson Greatbatch was building a device to record heart rhythms when he installed the wrong size resistor without checking. The device did not record anything. Instead, it began emitting a slow, steady rhythmic electrical pulse at approximately 72 beats per minute, almost exactly matching a healthy human heartbeat. He stared at it and understood in seconds what he was hearing. A heart that had stopped could be restarted by a signal exactly like this one. He spent 2 years developing the first implantable pacemaker. Over 3 million hearts are currently beating because a man reached into the wrong box and did not double-check what he pulled out. 36. Nutella was born from wartime desperation and a baker who had almost nothing left to work with. During World War II, cocoa was one of the most strictly rationed commodities in all of Italy. A pastry maker named Pietro Ferrero in northern Italy had a tiny remaining supply of chocolate and a shop full of customers who needed something. He looked at what was locally abundant and virtually free, hazelnuts, ground them into a paste, mixed in his last chocolate, and shaped it into a loaf that customers could slice and spread on bread. He was not trying to create a luxury product. He was trying to survive a famine and keep his business open. And that desperate act of survival is now sold in 160 countries and worth billions annually. 37. The dot above the lowercase letter I has a name, and it was invented by monks 1,000 years ago who kept making dangerous reading errors in candlelit rooms. It is called a tittle. Medieval handwriting was dense and tightly packed, and the vertical stroke of the letter I was nearly identical to the surrounding strokes in letters like M, N, and U. Monks copying sacred religious texts were misreading passages in ways that changed the meaning of scripture entirely. The solution was a small distinguishing mark placed above the I so the eye could separate it from adjacent strokes in an instant. That mark survived the printing press, the typewriter, the keyboard, and the touchscreen. Every time you type the letter I, you are using a readability fix invented by a monk, writing by candlelight in the year 1000. 38. Bubble wrap was not invented to protect your fragile packages. In 1957, 2 engineers named Alfred Fielding and Mark Chavan were trying to create a trendy new 3-dimensional wallpaper for modern homes. They sealed 2 shower curtains together to trap air bubbles and genuinely believed people would cover their living room walls with this plastic texture. Nobody wanted their home to look like a padded cell. They then tried marketing it as greenhouse insulation. That also failed completely. It was only when IBM needed to ship a new computer safely that anyone realized this bubbly failure had found its purpose. The thing you cannot stop popping when it arrives in a package was a rejected home decor product that failed at every single thing it was designed to do. 39. The folded triangular point on a hotel toilet roll is not decorative. It is a non-verbal hygiene signal built into hospitality industry training with a very specific function. The fold communicates without a single word that the bathroom has been fully cleaned and sanitized since the last guest, and the toilet roll has not been touched since the room was prepared for you. It is a physical stamp of cleanliness, a silent certification that the space belongs to you now. Almost every guest ignores it consciously, but their brain registers it in a fraction of a second and produces a micro feeling of reassurance they never notice having. Hospitality engineers designed a piece of folded paper to make you feel safe in a stranger's bathroom without ever saying a single word. 40. The expiration date printed on your bottled water has absolutely nothing to do with the water itself. Pure water does not expire. It does not rot, degrade, or spoil. The date exists entirely because of what is happening to the container surrounding it. Plastic bottles are not inert. Over time, the polymer structure breaks down and leaches trace chemical compounds into the liquid stored inside. The longer the water sits in a deteriorating container, the more those compounds accumulate in what you eventually drink. Regulators determined a threshold at which the container has degraded enough that its contents can no longer be considered safe. The expiry date marks when the bottle becomes the problem, not the water. You have been throwing away perfectly good water your entire life because of a plastic issue nobody ever told you about. 40 objects, 40 deliberate lies, all of them in your home right now. The ring was a warehouse clearance sale. The toy was a cleaning chemical. The snack was a chef's insult. And the device keeping millions of hearts beating was a toolbox mistake. None of this was ancient history. It was buried on purpose. Share this with someone who still trusts the label. Subscribe right now because what comes next makes this look like the warm-up.